The reading this morning is one of the most well-known passages of Scripture, the Christmas story, the Gospel of Luke, the Magnificat of Mary. And Mary said, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed. For the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud of the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise he made to our ancestors, to Abraham, and to his descendants forever. Amen." The world turned upside down. When you were a kid, did you ever lie on the floor and look at your living room upside down? Did you ever imagine someone coming in and walking on the ceiling, stepping over the tops of the thresholds? What did that do for your sense of perspective? When you looked at the picture on the front of the order service cover, did it take you a minute to realize that this is a photo of the Western Hemisphere of our Earth, but with the South Pole at the top and the North Pole at the bottom? That little stick there is Florida, but it's pointing the wrong way. Does this make you feel a little dizzy? Try turning the order service upside down. Feel better now? We get dizzy if we don't see the world right side up. We have these chambers in our inner ears that tell us how our head is oriented toward the pull of gravity, that tell us which side is up and which side is down. We use that sense to help us understand the world. If you've ever had that sense go haywire, if you've ever had a serious case of vertigo, you know that can be quite unpleasant and disabling. When Ralph was putting up the sign for the sermon earlier this week, he assumed I was going to be talking about the political situation, and many of you may have assumed the same thing. Well, I will touch on it before we're through here, but I want to talk about the larger phenomenon of tops and bottoms. Many of you may know that the Romans celebrated a pagan feast around this time of year called Saturnalia. The Feast of Saturnalia was associated with a lot of drinking, sexual license, and general riotous revelry. It was also a time of social inversion, when the high and mighty played at being poor and humble, and the poor and humble played at being high and mighty. The online Encyclopedia Romana describes some of its features. Quote, "During the holiday, restrictions were relaxed and the social order inverted." We're talking about the Roman holiday of Saturnalia here. Gambling was allowed in public. Slaves were permitted to use dice and did not have to work. Within the family, a lord of misrule was chosen, a role once occupied by a young Nero, who derisively commanded his younger stepbrother Britannicus to sing. Slaves were treated as equals, allowed to wear their master's clothing, and be waited on at mealtime in remembrance of an earlier golden age thought to have been ushered in by the god being Saturn. The revelry included singing naked, clapping of frenzied hands, an occasional ducking of corked faces in icy water. Figs, nuts, dates, and other dainties were showered on the people, women and children, men and senators alike, and bread and wine served among the rows, while guests were entertained by women fighting in the arena and cranes were hunted by dwarfs. Unquote. So Christianity then spread in the Roman Empire and borrowed this revelry, which was already happening at this time of year. And the stories of Jesus' birth had a kind of social inversion, the idea of the world turned upside down, but in a deeper sense than the 5 days of Saturnalia. The Christmas accounts of the Gospels of Matthew and Luke are doubtful as history, but they are beautiful stories in themselves. They are myths which point to deeper realities, and we tell them and preach on them and take them to heart around this time of year. What would the Christmas card industry do without Luke and Matthew's stories? What would we sing carols about? This morning I want to focus on a few verses from the Gospel of Luke that I read a few moments ago. They are a hymn which Mary pronounces soon after the angel Gabriel has told her that she is to have a son. Let me set that in context. All four Gospels portray a person called John the Baptist as a precursor to Jesus. But the Gospel of Luke weaves John the Baptist as an infant in his mother's womb into the story of Jesus' birth. Prior to the Annunciation to Mary, the same Archangel Gabriel had visited a priest of the Jerusalem temple named Zechariah and told him that Zechariah's wife Elizabeth, who was advanced in years, was going to have a baby. This baby was also going to be great in the sight of the Lord and bring many people to God. And Elizabeth was some kind of relative to Mary. I grew up thinking cousin, but now the New Bible translation just says relative. When Gabriel told Mary that she was going to have a child, that's called the Annunciation, Gabriel mentioned the other blessed event involving Elizabeth, who was already 6 months pregnant, although she had been considered barren originally. So Mary set out to visit her kinsman Elizabeth. That event is called the Visitation. And the story goes that when Mary came into the room, the baby in Elizabeth's womb jumped for joy. Elizabeth's child would grow up to be John the Baptist. Elizabeth, filled with that spirit, blessed Mary, and that caused Mary to deliver the hymn, which has come down to us through the ages as the Magnificat. And as most of you probably know, it was set to music by composers from Bach to John Rutter. But within that context, let's focus on the social inversion in the Magnificat. Mary opens with the lines which gave the hymn its name. My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Right there in the opening, she is saying one of the most blessed things about her being chosen is that she is so lowly. She is a nobody. Her relative Elizabeth, on the other hand, was not lowly. She was the wife of a priest of the Jerusalem temple, Jewish nobility at the time. But Mary was a nobody. How was it that God would select her to have this baby who was going to do such great things? A few lines later, she lists the great deeds of God as follows. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich empty away. This is a kind of social inversion. But Mary's not talking about play acting about bored Roman pagans at the Feast of Saturnalia. She is saying this is how God acts in the world, bringing down the powerful from their thrones, feeding the hungry, sending the rich away empty. So in the Magnificat, Mary asserts that God regularly turns the world upside down. The son that she bears will later tell the crowds assembled on the mount that the poor are blessed, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. He will say that in that kingdom, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Liberation theologians find in the New Testament what they call a preferential option for the poor in Jesus' teachings. One theory of why Jesus was put to death is that the established order was threatened, built as it was on many layers of injustice and oppressive tax burdens. So we have in the Jesus story itself strong elements of social inversion. The lowly and humble will be exalted, and the rich and powerful will be brought low. I think that these values work their way into the celebration of Christmas as it displaced the pagan Saturnalia and other festivals of its time, and the rituals of social inversion came to be transferred to Jesus' teaching. When we speak of social justice, when we point out that certain races or classes or categories of people are being marginalized or denied opportunities, we are really right in line with the teachings of Jesus. Now, let us fast forward more than 1,000 years to England's Civil War in the 17th century. We tend to think of Puritans as the people who founded Massachusetts and had a great influence on American culture. But while that was going on over here, the Puritans came to power in England. I told you last week that the Puritans were opposed to the celebration of Christmas in Massachusetts and actually outlawed it for several years. Well, they did the same thing in England. The Parliament forbade the celebrations of Christmas. But the English had grown quite fond of their celebrations and would not give up these traditions without a fight. Thus, 4 centuries ago, Britain saw a real war on Christmas. This is not an invention of Fox News. This actually was a war on Christmas, and the Grinches were the Puritans who had seized power in the government. And the title of this sermon, The World Turned Upside Down, comes from a ballad of that period, a ballad written by the defenders of the traditional English Christmas. Actually, what has come down to us is 3 ballads under that title, and I'll give you a bit of 2 of them. The first one is only 1 stanza. Quote, "If buttercups buzzed after the bee, if boats were on land, churches on sea, if ponies rode men, and if grass ate the cows, and cats should be chased into holes by the mouse, if the mamas sold their babies to the gypsies for half a crown, if summer were spring and the other way round, then all the world would be upside down." See how this ballad constructs all kinds of absurdities in order to show how absurd the Puritans' anti-Christmas policies were. It said that the traditional celebration is natural, and suppressing it is as unnatural as mice chasing cats. The third version of the ballad has more explicit references to the Puritan government. It was written in 1646, and the last verse has a reference to the Battle of Naseby, a crucial victory for the Puritans in the first phase of the English Civil War the year before. Quote, "To conclude, I'll tell you the news that's right. Christmas was killed at Naseby fight. Charity was slain at that same time. Jack tell troth to a friend of mine. Likewise then did die roast beef and shred pie. Pig, goose, and capon no quarter found. Yet let's be content, and the times lament, you see the world turned upside down." Unquote. The chorus line about being content is clearly sarcasm. The writer is lamenting the passing of Christmas, and as soon as the king was restored to his throne, lo and behold, the English went back to their Christmas roast beef and shred pie. The old English Christmas customs had a kind of ritualized social inversion. The servants would work hard to put on a great Christmas feast for the gentry, but the day after Christmas Day was called Boxing Day, not because people engaged in fist fighting, but because that was the day that the gentry boxed up the leftovers from the Christmas feast and brought them round to the houses of the servants. They might put a little money in the box as well. We like to sing wassail songs at Christmas time, but those songs originally were a form of ritualized extortion. The villagers would get together in gangs and go calling on the great houses on Boxing Day and the days after that, demanding entrance and food and drink. That kind of behavior would be out of the question at any other time of year. We love to sing, "We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year," but if you know the rest of the verses, you know that the song makes a demand for figgy pudding and says, "We won't go until we get some, so bring it right here." What cheek! Some of these old English customs translated to America, though the new democracy did not have quite as rigid a class system as England did. But suppression of Christmas was not any more popular here than there. What happened in 19th century America is that Christmas became gentrified and domesticated. A group of wealthy New Yorkers called the Knickerbockers, distressed by the drunkenness and revelry of the lower classes, reinvented the holiday as centered around home and family, around gift giving, and around a newly drawn, vaguely Dutch figure of Santa Claus. As this ethos merged with the growing middle class and the rise of retail commerce, the world gradually became right side up at Christmas. The drunken revelry quieted down. Well, that's what I wanted to talk about, the upside downness of this dark time of year and its historical antecedents. But are there any lessons for our situation today? I think there are. One is that the customs of the people, the habits they accumulate, and with which they have become comfortable, might just be more important than the policies chosen at the top. The Puritans never succeeded in wiping out the celebration of Christmas because it was deeply ingrained in the hearts of the people. But the Knickerbockers were successful in co-opting it and knocking off its rougher edges. The second lesson is that the teachings of Jesus contain a lot of powerful poetry about social stratification. Of course, we may need to defend a liberation Jesus from the conservative Jesus espoused by the radical right in the months ahead. And though most UUs will define ourselves as post-Christian, I think we make a big mistake in ignoring Jesus as a source of the liberal values we hold dear. The third lesson is that when the world turns upside down, you might get some new insight into the way it's put together. This nation came into being in a most improbable way. Smart money on both sides of the Atlantic was betting that the ragtag guerrilla army commanded by Washington was no match for the Redcoats. And there were many times in the course of the Revolutionary War when it seemed that all was lost for the Patriot side. So when the British Army surrendered at Yorktown, legend holds that the band of that army played a tune from a century and a half earlier to express their feelings. That's right, it was the old ballad called "The World Turned Upside Down." We don't know whether the British Army actually played that tune, but the authors of the modern play Hamilton picked up on that legend and wove it into a rap song in which Hamilton describes the Yorktown battle and its conclusion in these words, narrated by the hero, Alexander Hamilton. Quote, "We negotiate the terms of surrender. I see George Washington smile. We escort the men out of Yorktown. They stagger home single file. Tens of thousands of people flood the streets, their screams and church bells ringing, and as our fallen foes retreat, I hear the drinking song they're singing. The world turned upside down. The world turned upside down." This refrain is then repeated and swells, alternating with the cry, "We won." That's Hamilton, and the play is currently running, but of course it's reimagining the past. The cast of Hamilton, very much of the present, has already had a strong interaction with the new administration. I haven't seen the play myself, but from what I've read about it, its genius is that it reimagines the Founding Fathers as an entirely black cast, and the music is all hip-hop. So in the larger picture, the progressive agenda for the last 50 years is to bring into the constitutional phrase, "we the people," groups that have historically been left out of it. African Americans, Latinos, women, Native Americans, LGBTQ folks, immigrants. We've had a pretty good run in turning the world upside down, and Hamilton continues that project imaginatively in racially integrating or even taking over the sacred myth of the Founding Fathers. But the whole progressive agenda of inclusion became an explicit target in the recent presidential campaign. And Mr. Trump, who is emerging as a Saturnalian lord of misrule, promised his supporters in effect that he could turn back the clock to the era of white male dominance. That promise, like most of his promises, is already in the process of being broken because it is impossible to begin with. And Mr. Trump is admitting as much to his supporters in his victory lap tour. What? Did you take me seriously? But what he has done seriously is nominate people with no experience, but strong ties to wealth and corporate power, who will accelerate the inequality of the country. He will not turn the world upside down. The world will remain the world, and it is we who may be turned upside down. My friends, tomorrow the Electoral College meets to choose our next president. I have hopes but no predictions. While we should hold on to our values, we should never hesitate to question our assumptions or to learn from our mistakes and the revealing of our blind spots. As the English held on to their Christmas mince pie and roast beef and strong ale, let us hold on to the inherent worth and dignity of all people, the interconnectedness of all existence, our love for the earth, our passion for justice, and respect for the rule of law. The world is always turning. Let us hold on to one another. Amen.